And a warm welcome to you, our viewers around the world. I'm Michael Oku. The Trump administration in the U.S. is facing allegations that top security officials accidentally shared classified information with the journalists on Signal, a messaging app. The Atlantic magazine editor Jeffrey Goldberg says he was added to a group discussing U.S. airstrikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen just hours before they were carried out. The chat included the following exchange. The user, identified as U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, posted this message referring to U.S. plans to hit Houthi forces who had disrupted international shipping in the Red Sea. It said, "If you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again." Minutes later, according to Goldberg, the user, identified as Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth, responded saying this: "Vice President, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic, but Mike is correct. We are the only ones on the planet on our side of the ledger who can do this. Nobody else even close." William Glucroft is a U.S. analyst and the deputy editor of the Parliament magazine. I asked him if there have been any reactions so far from the EU.
It's been pretty muted on this side of the Atlantic, and I think that's probably the smart move. It's also not hugely surprising to be hearing this. If anything, there's some consistency between what was going on behind closed doors, or thought to be behind closed doors, or behind closed doors with a journalist unknowingly involved, and what we've been hearing in the public, right? No love lost with European allies or erstwhile European allies, however we're defining the transatlantic relationship right now. So none of this should come as much of a surprise to European allies. And I think that's why they're probably letting the infighting just go on and watch from afar as Washington kind of goes to bat against each other.
It would be difficult after hearing this, and again, assuming it's authentic, to not conclude the U.S. Vice President and Defense Secretary's opinion of Europe is, let's say, less than glowing, and that might very well be manifest in policy.
Sure. Again, a continuation of what we've heard in public from the Munich Security Conference, for example, and all the umpteenth statements from Donald Trump and his top officials about how they feel about Europe, the European Union, NATO's Europe contingent, etc. And we know this to be true when a European contingent of naval forces took to the Red Sea to help participate in keeping shipping lanes open and fighting back against Houthi attacks. There was an incident, I believe, a year ago of a German destroyer launching its missiles to intercept drones. It almost immediately had to be taken out of service to be resupplied. There were supply issues, procurement issues. Not to say that the U.S. is by any means perfect. The U.S. also has supply chain, procurement, and armament issues, and is not the indispensable nation, to use a popular turn of phrase. Nonetheless, the U.S. is just a much more dominant military power. And in a way, for all the criticism that we're hearing directed at Europe, there is some truth to it, right? The U.S. is a dominant military power and can do things and project power in ways that European states just simply can't.
When Hegseth writes, "We are the only ones on the planet who can do this," does that contradict in some way what Donald Trump has repeatedly said about the U.S. no longer being the policeman of the world?
Well, I guess there's a difference between ability, willingness, and the question of should they do it. The United States can do these kinds of operations and can be the policeman of the world, or at least has tried to. Doesn't mean necessarily they should or are willing to. In this case, there was clearly the decision that they were willing to engage in this kind of operation. And then in that case, they then have the ability to do it. So these are slightly separate things. I do think it's really interesting that what came out of the excerpt, and I want to emphasize the excerpt of what we've seen in this exchange, because Jeffrey Goldberg, of course, did not give us the full picture of this back and forth, that there was a fairly reasonable discussion about policy, pros and cons, the potential domestic political blowback, how the American public would receive it, these kinds of things. And this might be a very low bar, but given what we've seen publicly from the Trump administration about their sort of shoot from the hip, every day seems to be something different, very unpredictable, it's at least maybe somewhat reassuring, maybe that's too strong of a word, but reassuring to see U.S. officials are engaged in policy questions and debating back and forth about the value of engaging in one course of action or another. So I do think there's some I won't call it positive, but there is some significant takeaway there that I think we should be looking at very closely, in addition to the scandalous aspects.
That's William Glucroft, U.S. analyst and deputy editor of the Parliament magazine. Great to see you. For more, let's cross over to Luca Trenta. He is an expert in intelligence and covert operations at Swansea University. And we welcome you again to DW, sir. Do you have an idea how a journalist could have been mistakenly added to such a chat?
I mean, it is not unthinkable that in Washington, people in positions of power would use Signal. And this, even Goldberg has made the same point, that he was somewhat surprised of having the national security advisor adding him to a chat, but it was not entirely unthinkable, although even at the start of the whole ordeal, Goldberg thought that it might have been a scam, which it turned out not to be.
Make something clear to us. You say that it's not unthinkable, but why are messaging apps like Signal not suited to discuss classified information?
I mean, they are messaging apps, they are encrypted, and they're also open source, so there is a certain degree of security, but we've seen in the past few months plenty of attempts of hacking these messaging apps. And there are, for example, in the Pentagon, there are specific regulations that prevent the use of messaging apps for classified and non-public US government information. So this is not the type of information that should be shared on Signal. For example, we know that the Biden administration was using it to set up sort of meetings, but not this type of meetings or not this type of communication.
You don't sit on any government, of course, but you're an expert in this field. And I'm sure that some viewers out there listening are wondering, how does this kind of communication usually happen? On what platforms? I mean, you said that the Biden administration was using similar platforms as well. Is this something that governments do all the time?
No, it's not. I wouldn't want to give the impression that what the Biden administration was doing was the same. The Biden administration was simply setting inter-administration meetings on this type of app. What generally does happen is that there is a use of government communication, government-protected communication, and not private messaging apps that can simply be downloaded from the open market. This, I think, is the main difference. Classified information should not be shared on this type of messaging apps.
Walk us through a scenario briefly. How could leaked classified information pose a threat, a real threat, to national security?
I mean, if we are to believe Goldberg, and I think we have good reason to believe him, and even Hegseth in the segment that you presented did not deny that the chat was real, that it happened. It denied unconvincingly that there were war plans. But apparently in the chat, what was described was targets, it was the type of weapons used by the United States, it was the sequencing of targeting. So this is information that any journalist would be interested in having access to, but also foreign powers and foreign intelligence agencies might be very interested in having access to. And I think this is how this type of communication poses a threat to US national security.
Are there any oversight procedures in place to check if government officials are only using pre-approved channels?
I mean, normally this type of activity would definitely be reported to the Department of Justice and the FBI for an investigation. There would be an investigation, and quite possibly high-placed officials would be made to resign. As we know, both in the Department of Justice and in the FBI, currently there are very much Trump loyalists in the most important places, so an investigation is unlikely to occur. I think it would be up to Congress to keep this in the news cycle and potentially launch an investigation as to whether there were violations, for example, of the Espionage Act in using public mechanisms for classified information. But again, it's unlikely that we will see Congress taking any strong steps on this.
Wish we had more time. Unfortunately, we do not. Luca Trenta at Swansea University, our deep thanks to you.
Thank you for having me.